Welcome to Ask the Church, our video series where we seek to answer your questions about church worship, practice, or theology in under 5 minutes. Today's question is about Satan, and it was particularly directed at the idea of temptation. Who is Satan? When temptations arise, is it always his work, or are things more complicated than that? There are a couple of errors we can make when we think about Satan, and one of them is to believe that he doesn't exist, that there is no such thing, that it's just a myth. The other error, though, is to see Satan or evil spirits behind everything. Satan's actually a real character in the biblical narrative. Satan is actually a fallen angelic being, one of the great angelic beings who rebelled against God. And when you look at why he rebelled, the basic answer that we receive is that he rebelled in his pride or covetousness, that he was not interested in God remaining God, God's plan going forward, that he wanted God's place, that he thought of himself as chief of all. And one of the old Jewish understandings is that Satan's rebellion, this rejection of God and God's plan, was linked specifically to God's plan with humanity. That Satan wasn't interested in the way that God wanted to ennoble humanity and to gather humanity into his own divine life. So Satan fell, rebelled against God, rejected him. He actually then tries to take as many possible with him. Remember, he's not interested in God's plan, what God's doing. And so his goal is to destroy, to actually gather, consume, to destroy, to take people away from God's plan. So this is the basic understanding of Satan. When you look at the scriptures, the two sort of basic categories that his work falls into is that of temptation and accusation. That he's the great tempter and he's the great accuser. In both of these realms, he deals in lies. Jesus calls him in the Gospel of John the father of lies, that his temptations have a lot of truth in them, but they're twisted truth. Think about the way that he tempted Eve in the garden. He twists God's truth. His accusations are lies. Again, a lot of truth in them. I mean, we think we've all felt the weight of accusations that have some truth and some falsehood mingled together. He trades in lies, and he's the tempter and the accuser of the faithful. This means if he's sort of going around tempting and accusing him, that we do need our guard up. And 1 Peter actually says that we should be watchful. He prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. That Christians are right to actually be sober-minded and watchful. Pay attention to falsehood, to temptation, to accusation. It's also important, though, for us to recognize that Satan is not behind every single accusation and temptation we find. When 1 John talks about temptation, it actually places the root of it in 3 places: the world, the flesh, and the devil. In other words, our own flesh, the part of us that is aimed away from God. Not our body, that's not what flesh means. It means the whole of our being, body and spirit, that's aimed away from God. We accuse ourselves. We tempt ourselves as we move away from God, the flesh. The world is a source of temptation and accusation. The society around us, the pressures of a fallen world, cultures that are shot through with evil and with corruption, they draw us away. They accuse us. And Satan, the world, the flesh, and the devil. These 3 things. And so it's not that Satan himself is behind every accusation or every temptation. He's not even the root of the original sin. I mean, he was the tempter at the original sin, but Adam and Eve chose of their own volition to actually follow him. When you start looking for the root of evil, you realize that each of us is actually responsible for our own choices, that we can't blame Satan in the end for the choices we make. And yet he is there, seeking to devour and to consume, accusing and tempting, seeking to draw people away. But he's not the only source of that accusation and temptation. Our own flesh does a pretty good job working on us, as does the world around us. So this is a basic overview of Satan, the way that he operates, what he does. I want to end, though, with something that is really important. Satan is not the final word. We should be sober-minded and be watchful. But actually that passage in 1 Peter says, resist him firm in your faith. You don't resist someone that you can't resist. There's confidence in the scriptures that because we've been given the Spirit, because Jesus is on our side, we can stand against Satan. We can stand against our own flesh. We can stand against the world. In fact, Jesus sends the disciples out to proclaim the coming kingdom of God. And when they return to tell him the stories, he says, I see Satan fall like lightning. In the work of the church, the work of the devil is undone. Through his people, God conquers. Jesus conquered Satan on the cross. He conquered him again in the resurrection, and he will conquer him again in the very end when Satan will be bound and destroyed. It's important for us to remember the confidence and the hope. He is our enemy, but he is actually not a threat when we remain in Jesus. I think back to what Jesus said to Peter and the apostles when he said, I give you the keys of the kingdom. And he actually said, the gates of hell will not prevail against this. In other words, we can actually take the battle all the way to the very stronghold of Satan himself and expect victory because Jesus is on our side, because he has won the victory and included us in his own victory, because he has given us the Spirit who proceeds from the Father. So I hope as you hear this, you recognize that Satan is actually a real threat, accusing and tempting. He's not the only threat. Our flesh is a threat. The world is a threat. And yet in none of these threats should we actually be fearful. Watchful? Yes. Sober-minded? Yes. Standing firm in the faith? Yes. But at the same time, confident that the victory has been won by Christ and will be won. Hope that this answer helps. As always, thanks for watching this edition of Ask the Church. If you have other questions, send them to Stephen@incarnationrichmond.org. And now go in the grace of God.